So today we're going to talk about using nudges to create sustainable lifestyle changes. So this is a topic that is so very near and dear to my heart because I've been working with people for well over a decade. And really what I've realized is change is super hard. Health changes are hard. We get different news throughout our life. Maybe when we're 20, we're not even thinking about our blood sugar. We've never heard of a hemoglobin A1C. It's all new. And maybe when we enter our 40s, our doctors are doing some different lab work. Maybe it's the first time we get a random blood sugar, a metabolic panel, an A1C. And so as we change through our life, sometimes new health changes are also asked of us. So that's really why I was thinking about this topic. And I also wanted to highlight for this picture that we always think change may be linear or very organized, but really it's more like that blue tack. It's kind of messy and swirly and not always very linear. So what are we going to do today? So today I'm going to talk about a concept called nudging. It's something that's really well studied in the behavior science world, and it's something that I really like to bring over to our nutrition world. We're going to talk about some behavior changes and thinking about how we adopt nudges into our own life. I'm going to use fiber and increasing fiber intake as a nutrition example that we can think about. And then definitely thinking about barriers, because I know it's never smooth sailing, and we also need to talk about barriers and what goes on. So through this presentation, I'm really going to ask that instead of just being a passive listener, you really start engaging your brain and think through your own life. So I'm an expert in my personal life, but I'm not an expert in your life. And you definitely are. And so thinking about how do these concepts apply to your own life? So maybe running through examples from your last week, your last month, maybe thinking back to January. Did you set a New Year's resolution? How did that go? What are your health goals? So really listening to my kind of tips and suggestions and examples, but really figuring out how that works in your own personal life. Because I'm definitely not that expert. And I just want to empower you to be your own choice architect. And that's something really within this framework of nudges that you can be the creator of what your life can look like. And can your environment be set up for health, or can your environment maybe discourage some of those healthy choices and make it a little bit harder to make them? So really put that thinking cap on as we go through this talk, and hopefully you can have lots of ideas and think about how this applies to you. So I think it's always very interesting to know who is talking and who is presenting. I think also it's just important to think about. So I am somebody who really wants sustainable change for the people that I work with. I want them in a decade or 2 decades to have a healthier life than when they first started chatting with me. I think that the people I work with are the expert in their own lives, and I definitely am not that expert, but my job really is to read as much scientific literature and study and do as much continuing education so I can bring kind of the newest research to all my visits. I think that as we go through our life cycle, as we age, and maybe as we have families and all these different things, our health can change, and how we are healthy can change. Our time commitments can change, lots of things. So I definitely love my friends and my family. I love to garden. These are pictures from my garden from this last summer. I love to cook. I love to bake beans into baked goods. So like black bean brownies, bean muffins, all of those things. When I was in college, I would bake all these bean-based bakery things and bring them to friends' houses. But unfortunately, at that time, they were not very tasty. So people definitely stopped deciding to eat the things I baked, but I've since refined. So people are more interested. And then I also definitely love nature. So that's a little bit about who I am and my perspective. So why do we want to think about nudges? Well, this is a dirty old toolbox, but I always think about when we're thinking about health goals, we have a whole toolbox, right, within our brain, and we can pick out different parts of that toolbox to fit different parts of our life. And I think nudging can be a very important, maybe like a Phillips screwdriver, something that it has lots of uses that we can really think about using. So it's just another tool. Is it the answer to all of the things that we want to change and be healthy with? It's definitely not the only answer, but it is something that I think we should really give a lot of attention and thought to as well, and figuring how we can apply this to our life. So nudges are another tool. So what is a definition of a nudge? So Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, they wrote a book together, an economist and a lawyer. And basically they started this idea around nudging, and it's really definitely caught in the community. But it's basically something that can alter a behavior in a predictable way that doesn't forbid options. So it's not something that all of a sudden you can only eat vegetables like with dinner. It's still a freedom and a choice. It's something that can kind of help, that's cheap and easy. So these are kind of the different frameworks around nudges. It's something that can steer you to the choice that you would like to have. So I always think about, like, if I'm going through my day and I realize I really want to exercise, and exercising is healthy for my body. I know it and I believe it, but I never have the shoes I need to exercise. My shoes might be my nudge, might be the thing that I can put in eyesight, something that I can have on hand when I go to work that I can pull out and be able to use that as a nudge. So really the idea too is, without limiting options, really helping to steer us towards healthy changes. And it's not something that's really punitive, but it's something that really kind of helps attract our attention and our focus. Sometimes we call them cues, for example. So why would we want to think about considering nudges in our own life? Well, it can really reduce the mental load of our brain. So oftentimes when we think about something healthy, people always think, well, what should I eat? There's a lot of thought that can go into that, and we can get really fatigued and tired. And sometimes by 3 p.m., we've thought about what we want for breakfast. We've thought about a snack and a lunch and another snack. And by the time we get to maybe 3 p.m. or dinner, we're like, wow, I have had to think so much about food. I just can't think about it anymore. So the goal of nudges is to reduce that extra burden of always having to think about what you want to eat, rather making nudges so the easier choice is the one that's just habit. It helps to automate our changes. So helping to make changes easy, and I'll go through some more examples later. It can increase the sustainability of our changes. So not always having to think and use this idea like willpower or mindset to do the healthy thing. It just makes the healthy thing the easy thing, which is more likely to happen. It really makes the choice that you desire more salient. So it really puts it more in your face and reminds you of the things that you want to do, and helps root that change into your life. So there's different types of nudges that I'll just go over. So thinking about priming or environmental design, opting in or out of programs, defaults, and incentives. So when we think about priming, I think priming is one of my most favorite nudges that I always think about. It's really thinking about cues. So really making people more sensitive to a particular option, for example. Altering our environment to make the healthy option the easier option. So I did a talk a couple months ago on progress and plateaus, and I brought this up there, but this is something that we really do in my home, and we put a big fruit and veggie basket on our countertop. And by the end of the day, as a family, we try to consume all those fruits and vegetables. It's something that's a great visual cue. So if I walk back in from work, I see 6 pieces of fruits or veggies still there. I know that's what I want to include in our dinner or make a focus in our dinner, because perhaps we've had less during our day. So it's a quick visual. I wish this was my house, but it's not. It's a a stock image photo, but it's sure beautiful. And they have fruits and vegetables on their countertop. Thinking about adding different veggies or different foods that you want more of onto an auto grocery delivery. I was working with someone a couple days ago and they said, hey, I know I'm supposed to eat more fiber and I like vegetables, I like fruit, but it's just so hard to get into my home. And what they thought was, hey, I get a grocery delivery that I get every week. Why don't we go through and think about 5 new things I can add that are high in fiber that will end up in my house? And so I will eat them. And so we spent our time brainstorming things to put on that grocery list. And they sent me a message recently and said that it was really helpful because now they have those in their house and they realize if they're not eating as much fiber because they're still in their cabinet. So it's a good marker and a good cue. Thinking about what your dinner plans are. So I have a paper every week and I write down like what our meal is for dinner as we eat as a family. And so I just put that on our fridge. And that's something that people know what we're going to have. My daughter can look at it and ask, like, what are we having for dinner? And I can point to that. So it's something that's a great cue for the whole family. And something that I always add fruits and veggies to. So that's thinking about priming. This is just another slide, thinking about those placements of food, really thinking about putting it in your visual eyesight, and fruits and vegetables can be out on the counter for a day and still be food safe. So that can be a great option. Thinking about default, so making that desired choice the default, is something that I find to be really helpful. So adding that auto grocery order, signing up for a healthy recipe blog. I realized recently I've been signing up for a lot of cake baking blogs. And so in my inbox, and as I'm going through emails, all I see is big cakes. And I realize, hey, I keep wanting to eat cake. Why is that? Well, I'm getting a lot of cues and messaging around cake. So I switched it up and added a couple recipe blogs around more fruits and veggies. So now my inbox has lots more produce, and I find myself thinking more about our produce that we're going to have. Thinking about some incentives. So really just another way of nudging, kind of thinking either through added cost or worse choice of some payment or added positive benefit for the better choice. So these are things that I was thinking, like getting a veggie delivery, adding the produce to your weekly grocery order, because it's a really big unused cost. I find this a lot with people I work with. They'll say, hey, I'll buy the fruits and veggies, but they'll rot in my fridge. And so that definitely is a cost. So the incentive, once you have them in your house, is to consume them, because grocery prices are so high right now. So if we let food waste in our fridge, that is definitely a big cost. Something to think about if we're going to start adding more fruits and vegetables come to our doorstep or buy them, we want to really think about, if we're not able to eat the amount that we're purchasing, is that going to reduce our motivation to make a change? Are we going to think, hey, I'm just not someone who can add vegetables to my meals, I might as well give up? Or are we going to take that motivation and think, let me really research some recipes and think about how we can add this to our lives? So some different ways to just think and kind of reframe different things, I think is really important. This is another thing that can be really helpful if you're thinking about trying to have less salt in your diet or sodium. We do know that a lot of sodium comes from processed foods or frozen foods, or, for example, sometimes fish is packaged in salt solutions and frozen, things like that. But I think if we're trying to reduce the salt that we add to our food, putting the salt away in a cupboard so it's not at our visual eyesight, and putting all of those delicious and colorful spices right next to our kitchen. This is something that I've done recently because I realized, why do I keep adding salt to our food? It's because salt was the only thing out on my counter. And so I thought about it as I was reading about nudges. I was like, well, I'm going to start putting all of my new spices onto my counter, and I'm going to put the salt in a countertop directly away from where I normally cook. And we've really stopped adding extra salt to the foods that we eat, because I'm not really willing to walk halfway across the kitchen, go through a cabinet. It's out of sight, out of mind. Also thinking about different cues. If we put our shoes that we like to exercise with at our doorstep, it's really helpful to really have it more on your mind and have that cue of thinking about being more active. I've been talking a lot lately with people around this really rainy weather. So people aren't wanting to go out and exercise, neither do I. And so thinking about what are some alternative cues that we can think about when the weather is poor. This is one that is definitely great for summertime or when weather is not rainy and windy. Thinking about how we use nudges to increase our activity. So activity and increasing, really helpful for thinking about blood sugars, helps our body to actually absorb that sugar better. Also really helpful for lowering our LDL cholesterol, really helpful for mental health as well, just getting our body moving, getting more oxygen to our brain, building lean body mass, all good things. Some people like to have alerts on their phone for movement. Different apps or wearables you can have, like watches, to help prompt you to exercise. They can vibrate if you've been really still for a while. I like to use planners, so a paper planner can help you cross off days that you've been active. I think it's really helpful to think about reducing the pressure. So for me, I am always thinking, well, I should get out and exercise for 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes, or it's not worth my time. And then in the last couple of years, I've reframed that. And I tell myself, hey, Leah, if you can get out for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a block walk, that's great. You should be proud of that. And that is like a great success. So that's really what I shoot for. And sometimes when I'm at that block, I'll see a neighbor and chat with them and do a couple more blocks, or sometimes I'll decide that I feel so great and I have some time and I'll add and end up walking for 30 minutes. So just getting yourself out the door is really helpful, and being happy with even 5 or 10 minutes versus always feeling the pressure of a 60-minute walk. It's really hard to find those times. Finding an accountability partner. Katie Milkman has really coined the term temptation bundling. So bringing something super fun that you like, high value, and pairing it with something that's really maybe healthy for you. So a great example of temptation bundling for me is listening to podcasts that I really enjoy listening to, or listening to my favorite songs. So I only do those two things when I'm working out. So if I have a favorite podcast and I realize I have not been able to listen to it and they're building up, it's because I haven't been active. So it's a great another kind of nudge and prompt, because I get alerts on my phone that new ones are coming out. And if I haven't watched the old ones, I know I'm really behind on where I want to be for my activity. If you work at Stanford, we purchase parking. And so instead of trying to get that A parking, maybe getting a C parking. So you have to build walking into your day. That's something that you can also think about, or parking your car farther away from a store entrance. And then definitely using your shoes for cues to really think about being more active. So I think a lot of people say, well, it's hard to keep things sustainable, right? It's really hard to make a health goal and keep it going. But I think if you all think about all the things that you do and the habits you've grounded in your life and all that you accomplish, you can realize that health goals can be very similar to that. Sometimes we like to put them in a separate bucket and we say, hey, health goals aren't always sustainable. They're easy to fall off and they're more challenging. But we do a lot of things in our lives that really kind of become habit that we do for decades. And so really thinking about health goals can be just another thing that we can add to our life and really make a sustainable change, and really think about making that work. I like to always think about when I am very consistent with Exercise, for example, it's something very stable. What is the structure within my life that helps that to happen? What's my schedule or my environment? What is sort of helping me to do that? So just kind of thinking through those processes. And to just really know that change is not linear. Change is like that first picture, zigzaggy and sometimes messy and tangled. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to come out on the other side having some meaningful change. Sometimes when you're in that middle period where it's feeling more frustrating or things aren't always quite sticky enough, I always think about behavior change. You want to make them really sticky so we keep up with them. Knowing that that doesn't define what your change is going to look like at the end. You just might be in that kind of middle area that's a little bit tangled and knotted, but it doesn't mean that you can't untangle. But I think what really helps us to untangle those knots and make things sort of get back on track is what is our self-talk? What are we telling ourselves inside our brain? Are we saying, hey, this change thing is too hard. I'm somebody who doesn't change. I'm so stubborn. I have no time. Or are we saying things like, change is hard for everyone and I'm doing it? Or I got out and I did a 10-minute walk. Or I ate a new fruit yesterday. I am kind of focusing and thinking about all the different positives. It's not that one new food one time is going to change our cholesterol or our blood sugar, but it's laying the foundation to make those bigger changes, right? We don't go from, I was telling someone the other day, we don't go from an A1C of 15 or 10 double digits to an A1C of 6. There's a lot of steps that go on that we have to lay the foundation for to get there. We don't move our cholesterol numbers overnight. We build these changes as we go. And then always just really thinking about keeping moving, keeping that resilience as we go, even when it feels frustrating and challenging. This is something I'm really passionate about. So we really want to align the action that we are hoping to get with the expected outcome. So for example, if we are going to exercise, say we talk to our provider and they say, hey, it would be really helpful if you got 150 minutes of activity a week, 30 minutes, 5 days a week, walking, whatever you'd like to do. Like, okay, great. I'm going to do that. And then in your brain, you say, from the 150 minutes of activity, I want to lose 10 pounds in 1 month. So that's like the idea in your brain. Well, that idea is not going to be very successful because we know that 150 minutes of activity a week is very healthy for our heart, for our brain, for our cholesterol, for our blood sugar. But it's not necessarily the thing that's going to drop our weight at 150 minutes in the week, 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Our weight is probably going to stay more weight neutral. So if we measure the success of our activity on a measurement like weight in pounds reducing, we're not measuring what the desired outcome is going to be. Our desired outcome could be weight loss, but activity is not going to get us to that desired 10-pound weight loss, because activity tends to be really healthy for our body and also helps us to maintain the weight that we've lost, but is not the huge driver of losing weight, unless it's a higher calorie burn, like burning 500 calories, doing 5 miles 5 to 6 times a week. So a lot of exercise. But most of our weight loss comes from nutrition changes. So I just think it's really important to align what we are doing, our action, with the expected outcome. So we're not disappointed if we haven't aligned it in the first place and we don't get the desired outcome. So if we're thinking about that weight loss as something we really want to focus on, instead of increasing walking 30 minutes, we can do that. That's very healthy for our body. But if we're going to measure based on weight loss, let's say we generally eat a big cookie or some cake or something like that at the end of our dinner meal. So instead of doing the cake or the cookie at night, we switch it out and we think about doing cocoa dusted almonds or chocolate covered almonds, like a 1/4 cup, or we do our dessert 2 days a week instead of 7 days a week. So those changes are going to move that scale number. So we just want to really think through our goals and what our desired outcome in our mind is, and make sure that we create goals that are going to get us that outcome. At Stanford, I think we have over 55 dietitians that are all specialized. So if you are seen at Stanford, you can always ask your primary care provider or specialty clinic providers to see if they can make a referral. So you can meet with one of us and really make sure that your goals align with the outcome that you want. So this is the example that I'm going to give around fiber. So in general, the goal for most people is 25 to 30 grams per day, which is really hard to get unless you're a little bit intentional about it. And really, there's so many different benefits. There was a study that really looked at kind of all the different reviews of different articles and research around fiber. And there was a very significant decrease in heart disease and different strokes and mortality and type 2 diabetes for people who did eat more fiber versus people who eat less. And oftentimes in these studies, it's not even people who get to the 30 grams per day. Maybe they're at 20. And then the people who are lower at like 5 to 10 grams in a day. So fiber has a lot of great benefits. So I'm just going to take you through kind of an example of how to use nudges with increasing fiber. So also just to kind of help understand a little bit more fiber, it's really basically like that roughage. So there's two types of fiber. There's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. I always think about like an apple. The outside is insoluble fiber. It's more like roughage, and the inside is soluble, more like forms a gel in your intestine and helps slow gastric emptying, helps you to feel a little bit more full. And the insoluble fiber is more like scrubber brushes in your colon to keep you healthy. A lot of fiber is not digested, doesn't cross into the bloodstream, so it ends up and stays in the intestine to help keep you more healthy and to help feed all that healthy gut biome. So it's those little microbes in our gut that really feed off and enjoy fiber. So ways to use fiber and nudges. So thinking about different ideas, kind of taking you through the steps, like what do you want to know to help you make that change? What information do you need? You might need a list of foods, like what foods are high in fiber? Is all fruits and veggies high in fiber? Are beans higher in fiber than different fruits and veggies? What are the amounts? What are high fiber foods? Some people might be more number-based people, so they might want to look at what is the gram amount of fiber, and I want to count up to make sure I get between 25 and 30 grams per day. I'm meticulous and I want to track. And then the ways to really think about kind of more nudges is trying to place those foods that you've noted as higher fiber in your vision or in the fridge, on your counter, or already place them in your bag or your lunch bag. When I think about increasing fiber, just my own personality, I'm more in line with just trying to add 2 new fiber-rich foods to my day and know that I'm going to end up by eating more fiber than I was a week ago, a month ago, or even last year, rather than sit and write down all the fiber grams I'm eating or track the fiber grams, because I find that a little bit too meticulous. And I find that to be really ridden with a lot of friction, which I'll talk a lot about later. We want to get rid of friction with our goals. We want to make them as easy as possible. So I would think more about what are high fiber foods and how do I add them to my day? Maybe I throw in half a cup of beans on my lunch, and maybe I add an extra veggie that I know is higher fiber to my dinner. So thinking about our goals, increasing fiber, really focusing on kind of where is fiber found, plants, looking at that fiber content list, and picking your favorites to add is more kind of my route. Thinking about what is your desired outcome? How are you going to measure? Are you just going to be comfortable knowing that you're eating more fiber and that there's a really large body of research that says you're reducing your risk for heart disease, you're helping your cholesterol, or do you want to see those numbers change? It depends on what kind of person you are. And then thinking about the time frame, like when to add fiber and how to add nudges within that. How do you make your fiber more visual? How do you sort of know that you're eating more fiber? How do you get that fiber-rich foods into your house, more plants? And then also, how do you make it fun? I'm all about making things fun. So thinking also about automating, increasing your fiber. So getting that veggie delivery, which I've mentioned, adding produce to your weekly grocery order if you order your groceries. I like to walk the produce section first. And so really fill your cart up, or your whatever you're storing your groceries in, full of fruits and veggies first. And then I always carry around a list. It's normally not very organized like this paper. It's normally a hand scribbled note with what I need to buy. But at the top, I always start with fruits and veggies and write it at the top and make a list of our favorites for the week. Sometimes I get buy-in from my family and ask them, what do you want to eat this week in regards to fruits and veggies, and see if they're on sale when I go to the store. If they're not, I sub in different ones, but no complaints here. So I guess it's okay. Also thinking about making it easy. So this is something I do every week. I prep a lot of vegetables, whatever I have on hand, and then I throw them together for dinner. So in general, most of our dinners are 15 minutes or less to end up on the table. Like I'll saute a whole bunch of, in this example, like carrots and red bell peppers and onions. And then the other day I made a fried rice because it's something that we really love. And over half of our fried rice was vegetables. So for every cup of rice that I added for everyone, I added a cup of vegetables that I had already cooked down. I think I also added mushrooms and broccoli stems to this. So it had a lot of extra fiber in it. And then really trying to prep things and put them in your vision when you open that refrigerator. So sometimes I even put my veggies or things I've prepped that I really want to remember to eat outside of the veggie drawer. And I just put them front and center wherever I want them to be. So I remember that I want to finish them and make them more prominent in my display. And then this is one of my favorite things. We really want to make the nudges that we use in our life and the cues fun. So behavior change that is not fun, it really lacks luster. It's something that is hard to continue and accomplish. So if we can build fun in, I always think around temptation bundling with Kitty Milkman. Really, what's your favorite song? Prepping foods and listening to your favorite music, involving your family, having family time, telling jokes, listening to your favorite podcast, just making it as fun as possible. I also wanted to kind of think through some barriers, and I put this page up here because I think that barriers, especially right now with our weather, is so important to think about. So if we're in a routine of being really active and the weather changes, it's really windy or really rainy, and we're used to working out outside, what happens? What changes happen? Well, maybe we don't want to work out outside anymore because it's raining, we're going to be freezing and not that fun to work out in the rain. How can we change our nudges? If our nudge before was exercise shoes at the doorstep, what could our nudge convert to during the rainy sort of winter time? So really thinking through kind of some of those barriers. And for me personally, it's really getting those alarms that I'm missing all of my favorite podcasts because I'm not being active, and then making activity in my house and doing something maybe more at home, like on a yoga mat and listening to my podcast there. So something that really reminds me that I'm falling behind on my activity. Also to go back to think about barriers, I think sometimes being aware of how much we're moving can also be really helpful. I was on a meeting a couple of months ago, and one of the people at the meeting, they were saying, oh, on your phone, if you have an iPhone, there's a little heart app and it tracks your steps for the day. And I was like, oh, really? That's so interesting. I've never thought about that. I don't use wearables in general for my own personal. I think they can be helpful, but I don't. And so I looked at my steps for the day. It was a 3:00 meeting and my steps were 500 steps for the day because I was working at home and I think I had just gone bedroom to office, had lots of patients I was seeing in classes, and then kitchen to office. So there really weren't that many steps by 3 p.m. And that really prompted a lot more intention around being active before I start work and after I start work. So I no longer have the 500 steps at 3 p.m. And so maybe your step count is like 20, or maybe it's 10,000, who knows, but thinking around how we can root those in sustainable change. And that was kind of information that gave me a wake-up call to really turn on the alerts when I was missing my podcast to trigger that I'm not being as active as I want to. So thinking around this idea called sludge. So sludge or friction is something that they talk about in their book around nudges. So Thaler and Sunstein really talk about this as something that can really get in the way of our nudges. It can make our goals more challenging and really make us want to just give up. So thinking around what is the sludge or friction in our health goals? For example, if we take the adding the fiber idea, so say we decide fiber is healthy, I want to add more fiber into my diet. And the goal that we make is I want to research exact grams of fiber. I want to track my fiber grams. I want to get 30 grams per day. And we just make this really long list to try to increase fiber. Well, if we really go back and think about it, there's a lot of friction within that goal, right? We have to have a lot of knowledge to even start implementing. We need to know how much fiber is in all the foods that we consume. We need to have fiber lists. We need to have a way to track how much food we're eating and our portions and measurements and grams of fiber. There's a lot of sludge or friction in that goal versus thinking about the goal I mentioned earlier, maybe just researching what foods are high in fiber and choosing 2 to add in your day. So that goal has a lot less sludge or friction. Does it ensure that we're getting 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day? We can't promise that it does, but it gets us more fiber than we were getting prior. And so that is definitely a benefit. So I hope that that also really makes sense, trying to not have too many steps to accomplish your goal. When I'm working with people and they make these really large goals with lots of steps and they're very complex and I'm confused listening to it, I think maybe they have an idea in their head. I try to really simplify. Health changes can get more simple and really simplify that so that we have less friction to really give up and not accomplish. Because if we put too much friction within our goal and then we give up on the goal, then we're really not making any inches towards that change. And then thinking about, is there kind of like different resistance that we're adding to our change, ways to make it harder? For example, our change is being more active. Do we need special shoes that we do not have yet to be active? Well, that's adding a lot of friction. Could we do something like a walk that we could do in shoes that we're used to wearing to reduce that friction? So not having to wait for special shoes to start that activity. And then if you get special shoes and you decide you want to start jogging within your walking, that's great. But starting first with walking with just tennis shoes or something you can wear. So I have a story or an example. So I brought this up the last time I did a presentation. So really my main goal has been to be on my phone less and to go to bed earlier, because I find that I will have a busy day, do dinner, do cleanup, and then we'll get on my phone and just waste time not doing the things that I really want to do. And then that really affects the quality of sleep and me being able to go to sleep with just being so engaged with the phone late at night. And so my plan was to take my phone and charge it in my kitchen. So this is a picture of my kitchen. So I put my phone charger in the kitchen. That was my cue, no longer by my bedside. That was my nudge to put my phone away earlier, which I did very successfully, and I slept a lot better. But what I realized a couple of days into this, I was really tired one day, and my phone was actually my alarm. And so I didn't realize that without having an alarm, I needed to get up early for work, and I did not get up because there was no alarm. And so I then bought an alarm. So now that problem has been solved. So I'm still charging my phone away. But I think the example of this is to really think, I just thought by charging my phone in the kitchen, it was going to solve all my problems. Everything was going to go great until the day that I woke up late for work, which was really stressful and really very frustrating. But what I realized is, hey, I need to apply some resilience to this situation and think about how to fix it, take a deep breath and not get caught up on the frustration of it. So I just bought a really inexpensive alarm clock. So trying to move through those barriers. But I did want to give up in that moment and bring my charger back to my bedside, but I persisted. So just kind of a story that doesn't really have to do with food, but has to do with another health goal, having better quality sleep. So thinking about challenges around our health goals. So we don't get immediate feedback when we have a health goal oftentimes. So if we go to the doctor or a provider and we're getting flagged for elevated blood sugar or elevated cholesterol, for example, we're not going to get another lab for 90 days, probably 3 months, maybe even 6 months, depending on where that lab is. So we're not going to get some immediate feedback for the changes that we're making. So it's really hard to continue that motivation with just this idea that, hey, I'm doing something healthy for my body, rather than seeing that immediate feedback. Same with weight loss. Weight loss, we can do healthy things for our body that will eventually help with reducing our weight, but it doesn't happen right away. And so it's hard to keep sort of that goal and idea and the changes very salient, very in the present in our mind to continue doing it. It's easy to lose that motivation. Things like improving our gut health. So we need to eat fiber very consistently to feed those healthy gut bacteria in our bodies to help them build up and to be strong. It's not just from one apple one time a month. It's from consistent, repeated exposure. Building our stamina, like if we go on a hike, we really need to build our muscle, lean body mass to be really confident to hike up a larger hill before we get winded. Reducing our waist circumference. So these are all different things that say, hey, you do one healthy thing that is really healthy for your body, but it's not going to necessarily change these outcomes that we may be interested in changing. So it really needs more consistency. And some ideas around how to keep that consistent is really think about temptation bundling to really bring forward that benefit immediately. So maybe the benefit, if we go back, we want to lower our blood sugar, our hemoglobin A1C in the next 90 days. Well, maybe whenever we go out and we do resistance activity, we pair that with something, our favorite song, or we pair that with family time, something that we enjoy, or walking with a friend, calling a best friend on the phone and walking with them. So we root that change in something that gives us positivity without knowing the outcome of our lab. So thinking about not sure like how you can change or what nudge to even try. I've given lots and lots of examples. One of the things I really love to do for myself and is rooted in research is actually give yourself advice. So we're the best advice givers for ourselves. So if you look at your life, like what advice would you give if you were your best friend or neighbor or somebody asking for advice? And maybe that's a good place to start. We actually end up giving sometimes better advice to ourselves than other people would because they are not the expert in our lives and our brains. Really thinking about what do you want to change? Like, what is that thing that has been on your mind? I would start there because it's already something you're motivated to think about. I'd really start small because when we start really large, it just creates a lot of infrastructure that might be harder to sustain rather than starting small and really kind of like building up that change. And then this is another thing that I really like to do when I'm thinking about a new goal for my own personal health. There's this idea called the empathy gap. So Leah Fishbach kind of created this term. And what this means is when we're making goals, we want to be in a similar mindset to when we're going to have to do the goal. So to give that an example, so if we're making a goal around dinner time, so we want to eat more fruits and veggies with dinner, or we want to eat less processed carbohydrates with dinner, or something like that, then we want to make the goal that we're going to have when we're hungry and waiting for dinner, because that is how we're going to make the most realistic goal. We don't want to make that goal when right after lunch, our stomachs are full, we're super satisfied, and because we're going to look at our future self and say, hey, like maybe I'm not going to have any carbs with dinner. I'm only going to do vegetables and meat or protein or plant-based protein or tofu with my dinner. But when you get to your dinner, you realize, man, I haven't eaten in 5 hours. I'm really hungry. I need those carbs. My brain needs some energy. And so when we made that goal, it was actually not a great time. We want to make the goals when we're actually going to have to live them. So even if you're in a class and it's 3 o'clock, maybe wait to make your goal till before dinner, if that's going to be your goal. Or if your goals are on breakfast, wait till the next morning to really think through what that goal might be. And then really, what can we think about? How do we make that immediate experience gratifying? And I think this is really important to think about, because a lot of the things we focus on for health changes need at least 3 months to give an outcome. So if we're doing all of these things for our blood sugar, well, we have to wait a while to actually see. I mean, with blood sugars, we can look at continuous glucose monitors if they're available, or checking our blood sugar. However, sometimes like cholesterol, we don't really have great markers and ways to get cholesterol labs until we're due for them. So really thinking about how do we make that immediate experience more gratifying. And I am personally all about fun. So really trying to make that healthy experience rooted in fun, whether it be activity or maybe cooking a new meal, trying new flavors, including your family, if that's something that's really fun for you, because it really helps bring the benefit really near and dear versus really far and trying to keep something up for this very future self. So really, when you're thinking about assessing and evaluating your own personal nudges that you're creating, and hopefully you've been thinking about them for your own life, thinking about your internal monologue. What are you telling yourself around your changes? Are you kind of your own cheerleader, or are you thinking you can't accomplish them? So really trying to think around that, acknowledging improvement, not perfection, thinking about, was that better than it was before versus all in, all out mindset, because those can be really detrimental to making sustainable changes. And then just not trying too many nudges at once. Maybe after this presentation, you try to put veggies on your countertop and shoes by your door, and all of a sudden your house looks a lot more cluttered than before. I'd say try one and see how it goes and then build on that. Something I always like to think about too is not being paralyzed by perfection, because if we have this idea of a perfect goal in mind, oftentimes there's no such thing as a perfect goal, and there's no research that says if you have 30 grams of fiber, then you will be, I don't know, the healthiest person on this planet or something. So we don't really want to get paralyzed in perfection. And if we don't hit 30, or we don't have a blood sugar that is always time in range 100%, something that's not very attainable, we don't always want to start. And so if we can't have that really high level that's almost impossible to achieve, it can really be a huge barrier to even getting started and sustaining changes. Start small. And then finally, how do we ensure sustainability? So we really build the nudges into our life, thinking about kind of all the other changes that you've built into your life and how you've made those sustainable. And health goals can be just like those other goals. I mean, you look at your fridge and you have food to cook. That's like a goal that takes a lot of things to make happen. You can also add activity and make that very sustainable in your life and build on those different health goals. If you feel like your health goals are getting harder to sustain, think about the fresh start effect. So maybe on a Monday, if you feel like you've been less active because it has been rainy, maybe those podcasts are piling up, Use Monday as a fresh start to say, hey, I'm going to recommit to being active indoors if it's still raining. So committing to your health. Sharing your plans with loved ones or people close in your life can also be helpful for some people. And then just one of my last slides is yesterday was National Registered Dietitian Day so Stanford really focused on highlighting all the different expertise that all the dietitians have at Stanford. We've really grown our team in the last year or so, and we have dietitians that are specialized in all different realms of nutrition. I specialize in blood sugar and diabetes. However, we have people who have certifications and specialty certifications in all different aspects. So if you have nutrition questions, don't hesitate to ask for a referral. If you go somewhere else and you don't go to Stanford, there are dietitians in all healthcare situations. You can always ask for a referral if you want some more customized help. And so that's the last slide I have. So there are some questions that came in. So I wanted to just put them on a slide deck and answer them live. There are questions that people ask. So the first question is, a forgetful senior living at home, timers or alerts without a smartphone or Alexa. I think maybe getting an alarm that you can set at a certain time could be maybe helpful, but also really figuring out what is the purpose of your alarm. Do you need an alarm to remind you to get up and walk, or maybe just finding out a little bit more around that, and that can really kind of help dictate. Because maybe an alarm isn't what you really need. Maybe having a friend that walks by your house and knocks on your door and asks you for a walk on Monday, Wednesday, Friday could be helpful. You don't maybe necessarily need a gadget, but it's hard to say without knowing more. How to balance a plant-based diet with protein needed. So in general, we say 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is recommended for most people. Of course, if you're doing lots of resistance training or a bodybuilder, that might increase, or you're healing from surgery, that might increase, but that's our general. So if you know your weight in pounds, you divide that by 2.2 to get your kilograms of body weight. And so for a lot of people, maybe 60 grams, maybe 50 to 70 grams of protein per day is adequate and healthy, which we definitely can get through our plants that way. How to increase a strong immune system and how to boost the microbiome. So that, I love that question because that really is rooted in fiber. So fiber is a great way to really feed the gut bacteria. It's the food that they really like to eat and ferment in our gut. So I'm thinking about ways to add fiber to our diet. This person said, just finished 14 chemotherapy sessions looking for recovery insights. That must have been a big haul. So I'm glad that you're here and asking that question. I think just starting small and looking at your new life. I think when we go through these big changes, it's almost like that whole fresh start idea, right? We've gone through this really big cancer treatment, and now we're looking to our future. What does our future look like? How do we build back those health goals? Maybe how do we build back some of that lean body mass and that strength? Maybe how do we build back some of that weight? Sometimes we lose weight. So how do we kind of help sort of with that? This person says over 50 weight loss struggle and advice. I think a lot of the advice given, thinking about nudges and starting small and putting cues into your life, maybe doing some type of automated fruit and veggie delivery or beans or lentils, something that's higher in fiber. And then which store-bought cereal in terms of carbs percentage on the label. So I think thinking about this, when we look at percentages versus grams, percentages on nutrition fact labels are rooted in a 2,000 calorie diet. And in general, it's 50% of your total calories would be from carbs in this instance on a nutrition fact label. So for a lot of people that doesn't maybe fit for their lifestyle. So I don't look at percentages for carbs. I more look at grams. And people are in lots of different ranges for grams. It can be very customized depending on what your activity is and what your goals are and your height and weight. So hopefully that is helpful to answer some questions. There are some other questions in the Q&A. Feel free to definitely pop them in. Someone said, great talk, appreciate best practice nudges, good eating practices relative to health and well-being. Oh, and they want to know about lowering high blood pressure. So that may be kind of an idea around hiding the salt, thinking about salt and not having that. Another thing I do when I'm in the grocery store on my little list, I highlight one new food I want to research. So if you go down the bread aisle, for example, I don't know, there's like 150 breads. There's so many bread options. And so maybe one time I go to the store, I'll dictate and have some time and look at maybe 5 or 6 bread labels and decide what one fits best for my family. You can do that with other foods that you think might be higher in sodium. Maybe if you like mustard, look at different mustards and find the lowest sodium one day and try it, but don't try to look for the lowest sodium for all your foods because that might be a lot. So the link will be available. This is recorded by the health library, so they'll record it and put it on their website. And then this person's asking, what steps can I take to prevent overeating when I'm tired or stressed? So I think this is a great question. So that's why nudging is so helpful, because it helps us to automate our changes. So if we're thinking about like when we're really tired or stressed, having those veggies that we've prepped on a Sunday evening, ready to go, front and center, prominent in our fridge, we can throw those together and put them into our meal versus realizing we don't have food available at home and having to stop by fast food on our way home. Thinking about what foods we bring into our house. If we have a favorite potato chip or chip in general, maybe not bringing them into your house, but if you're out with friends eating a sandwich, maybe you enjoy them in that instance, but you don't get the family size bag. Because at 11 o'clock, it always looks much tastier than in a deli, maybe. So I think maybe those can be helpful things, really trying to root within nudges and focus on how to be healthier. Oh, someone wants me to repeat the second question response. I think the second question is, the link will be available on the health library, the Stanford Health Library website, probably in the next couple days, so you can go and refer back that way. I don't see any other questions. Yeah, is there any other questions that anyone has? Anything that I can answer? I really so much appreciate that everyone came tonight to listen to this talk around making sustainable changes. And I'm just so kind of honored and grateful for your time and that you've stuck with me to the end. I know it's a lot, but hopefully all these examples will be helpful for you. Maybe a couple light bulbs went off. Maybe you're like, man, Leah and I are totally separate people, but I have my own ideas that I've applied to these concepts. And so I'm just really hopeful for that happens, because that is the most helpful, because you are definitely the expert in your own life. So really appreciate you all being here, and yeah, so honored to have this opportunity. Oh, one last person says intermittent fasting work? Intermittent fasting, there's a lot of different types of intermittent fasting that's been studied, like the eating over 8 hours, fasting for 16 hours, eating a moderate amount for 5 days a week, and doing a really hypocaloric intake 2 days a week, so less than like 500 to 800 calories or less per day, so our bodies think we're fasting. There's the every other day fast, so there's a lot that they're researching. But I would say that if it works for you to maybe eat over 8 hours, you could definitely try. Sometimes I think for a lot of people, it can get really challenging, and people get more anxious trying to eat over a shorter period of time and end up eating more and feel unsuccessful. But it's something you could definitely try. Great. I don't think there's any more questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Leah, for sharing all this really great information and healthy tips. I know I got some myself. Thanks to our audience for joining us and for all your terrific questions. If you'd like additional information or resources, please contact the Stanford Health Library. And everybody have a good night, and we hope you'll join us for our next lecture.